Throughout the course of my career, I've just seen a slow and steady degradation of ability to give a concise and specific brief to an external partner. I think being able to own the brief and all the elements of the brief and understanding what your brand standards are in a very concise and clear way, understanding what your tone of voice is, understanding your channel strategy, understanding your audience segmentation, like those pieces, if you can nail those really well, all of a sudden you can brief a whole host of external partners to come in and solve challenges for you because you can set what good looks like.
I'm Nicole MacLean, and this is Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. Our show consists of 3 parts. One, where we pull in other Composely team members to talk about content that matters to you, like a viral LinkedIn post or the latest trend. The second always includes an in-depth interview with a leading marketer, sharing actionable insights and a little inspiration. And finally, you won't want to miss the last segment, aptly called Friends Matter, where we're shouting out some of your friends and mine for their content wins in B2B marketing. Let's cut through the marketing chaos together. All right, Ashley, you are an editor extraordinaire. You've also somehow become like the queen of AI, not somehow, but very purposeful to become the queen of AI here at Composely. So I feel like there's this trend I'm seeing a lot whenever someone talks about AI. We know AI is a tool, it's not a replacement. That's great. But I feel like a lot of people say, oh, I use it to brief. Just use the AI in the briefing process, but you shouldn't use it to create. Is that true? Like, should you be using it in the briefing? Does it matter? I'm just so curious to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's a tool, not a replacement. And we're usually talking about that in terms of content creation, but I think it's also true in queuing up the content. And, if you have a purely AI-generated outline, it might be fine, but what value are you adding? What direction are you giving the writers? And I think that, for me, is the biggest part of the briefing process, is figuring out how to communicate what you want. And the amount of time that goes into a good prompt for AI to explain to it, this is the voice and tone I want, these are the topics you need to cover, blah, 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 to get to the outline, like, you're already doing that work. And if you're not, right, what the AI is going to give you isn't going to be killer. So,
like, I go to prompt, I'm like, I could have just written a brief at this point.
Yeah.
To do it well.
Yeah. And I think that's part of it too. Like, I think that is time well spent. That's one of my favorite things about the AI tools, actually, is learning how to explain what you want, I think brings some clarity to the end product. And so I wonder sometimes if there's a way to split the difference, like do some of this prompting to get whatever keyword research or high-level outline, but then don't ignore all that work you just put in. You can take the prompt and turn that into another part of the brief deliverable that gives more of that insight and instruction instead of only, these are keywords, this is your high-level outline, blah, blah, blah. Like, you can share that thought process that you collaborated with the tool on to get to the thing you think you're planning to send.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I've always wondered about using AI in the briefing process is that the core AI is a pattern recognition tool, at least as it exists right now.
Sure.
And if you want to create something actually unique or interesting or human or whatever, I mean, when you're putting a prompt in, isn't the deliverable just trying to give you like the most right answer?
Yeah, I think for the most part, I do think that you're going to get something somewhat formulaic. So it depends a lot on what your content goals. If you're trying to do something unique, thought leadership, like patterns are probably not the way to get there. If you're trying to compete with a couple of specific articles, here are the other top ranking articles, what do I need to be sure this piece covers to, give readers the same level of value? Then for a piece like that, sure, at a high level. And then I think the thing that I would emphasize is leaving room in the brief for the writer, because I see a lot of briefs with 15 different subheadings. And, if you do the math, you're giving the writer like 50 words to cover each topic, and you're not going to get any kind of density or creativity or insight. So, figuring out, sure, I want these keywords, I want these topics covered, but where do I pare that back and leave some room for the human processing that's going to make this unique?
I love that. I've heard people talk about, and when doing like company strategy, like leave a chair in the room for the customer. I feel like in briefing, it's leave a chair for the creative, whether it's a writer or designer, but like let them be able to have some buy-in and some ownership on the piece as well.
I think so too. And I think that's how you're going to get kind of a depth of insight in a piece. You know, you're giving them room to embody the target audience, to think about their pain points, what problem they're trying to solve by reading this content. And then it also leaves room for the writer to bring insights, whether it's their own subject matter expertise or something that came out of the research, because they will have done more research than like the outlining prompt that you gave the AI, you know, and they might come across other things. So leaving a little wiggle room and freedom, I think, is the way to go.
So I saw what's probably a TikTok video, but I don't have TikTok. So like a true millennial, I watched it on Instagram. And this person was saying, you know, understand your strengths, lean into that, and then leverage AI. That's going to be a thing. Leverage. We're going to do a quick sidebar. Everyone overuses the word leverage.
Mm-hmm.
I had a boss that would not let us use leverage unless we were actually talking about like pulling a
lever.
Yeah, pulling a lever or putting a stick under something to like transfer momentum.
You know who else loves leverage?
AI.
Yep. So on topic.
So on topic. That would be another quick thing. Okay, rapid fire. What are the words AI loves? We'll go back.
Ooh.
A rapid fire.
It used to be so big on Lifeblood. I haven't seen that in a minute, but who has ever written Lifeblood? Like, what did they feed this tool so that it thinks that every blog needs the word Lifeblood? And it was shocking to me. They have, I've seen it less lately, so it must have learned that no one wants to talk about Lifeblood. But like formulaic intros, you know, in today's digital world, wacky mixed metaphors, you know, you'll get something that's talking about like a car wash and a unicorn and a cooking recipe all in the same paragraph. And I'm like, excuse me, slow down. You know, they're Ensure. It loves Ensure.
Yes, because we love Ensure.
So does Grammarly.
Yes, it's so true.
It's so much. Like, just stop insuring things. You pretty much can't. Do you work in insurance? That's spelled different.
Yep.
But, like, how is this relevant?
Yep. Okay, I love that. Please be taking notes, everyone. It just makes so much sense. If it's an overused human word, AI is picking up on that because what it was trained on is all of what we write. And so the insures, the leverages, the ever-changing, the navigating.
Robust.
Oh, I haven't heard that one.
So much robustness.
So much robustness. Yeah, it's going to challenge us to expand our vocabulary. Go back to like do some SAT prep. Go through those vocab words. Figure out other ways to say things for sure. And this guy was saying use AI to basically enhance your weaknesses. And I totally see the value of that. But if you're not good at it, like I think about clients come to us a lot and they say, I have good ideas. I understand my market. I know I have something to say. I am not a writer. So of course, that's why they're coming to a content company. Can you help me? But as you think about using AI, maybe you're not a great briefer. You're like, I have this idea, but I don't know how to communicate this. Do you use AI? Because then how do you know if it's actually a good brief? Like if it's not your strength, how do you know? So I'm curious how there's two questions there. One, how do you think about using AI? And do you feel like you need to have some level of expertise to know when it's just kind of BSing you and you need to not do it? And then part two of that question is, what is then a good brief? How do you know if this is going to tee up a creative for success?
Yeah. I think that's the hardest part about briefs in general, whether you give it to a colleague to write or AI makes it or you have the agency make it. If you don't know what makes it good, then it doesn't matter who made it, even if you made it and you don't know what's good. I think there is some level of, ownership that has to come into play there. We're like, okay, I'm the one who's going to assign this out. So I need to read it. I need to get myself to some level where like maybe I can't create a great one, off the top of my head, but I know what needs to be in here and I can look at it. And then, as far as AI goes, I think most of the time it's BSing you. It's because it's misunderstood something core about your business or your product or your service or your target market. So I would think about the kind of prompting and training you're going to do. If you are planning to work with AI, build a custom GPT and make sure it's trained on, the things that aren't on your website already about your business. And I think that's what's hardest for writers, too, coming in, because they're going to look up what's on your landing pages, what's on your product pages. And if there's something in your head that doesn't make it into the briefs, then the writers don't know that. So whether you're putting it there or whether you're hoping that AI will read your mind, it's that kind of unique insight that's only in your head. So if you know, hey, this is a new product shift, or we're changing our marketing direction here, we want to tweak the messaging, we want to focus on this niche of our target demographic, then that's something that you know that's probably not already in the large language models. So you have to tell it. And I would say, like, when evaluating briefs, it really comes down to looking for the gaps, looking for what's missing. You'll spot something that if it's blatantly untrue, if it says, Composely offers bouncy houses, and really, no, that's not right.
Maybe coming 2025.
You'll easily spot things that are not true, and it's not usually, especially at an outline level, it's not usually getting deep enough into the weeds where it's going to say something like that as a suggested H3, so it's less about it being wrong and probably more about it not being nuanced and not going in the direction you want it to go unless you've pushed it. And it's going to be the same thing with writers. So I think that really ties into your second question of what makes a good brief. And whether you're writing it yourself, outsourcing it, using AI, you need to have, I think, a sense of the must-haves in a brief. What's my go-to brief template? What are the most important aspects? Maybe you're not great at writing headlines. So this is the title that's in my head, but feel free to change it, dear writer. But here's a little content description. This is what we're going for. This is what I want this piece to be about. Some kind of high-level outline of things that must be covered. And then I really think that's all kind of the basics. From there, you probably have more expectations around how you want it to sound. What's your brand voice? What kind of tone are we going for here? Is this piece different than the landing pages, for example? What are we going for exactly? Style guides, those kinds of resources that you need to be prepared to provide writers or AI tools, if you're trying to generate some of this kind of stuff. I think, too, if I'm a writer or an editor working on this piece, I really want to understand sort of the point of the piece. A lot of people will say, slide in a little CTA at the end. It's cool. What is the desired next action? Are we selling this? Are we encouraging demos? Do we want to encourage phone calls? What is the right next step? So letting the writers in on kind of what the game plan for this piece of content is. How do you want this to function? What do you want readers to come out of this knowing or doing next? I think that really helps just from a marketing perspective in terms of being the person who gets the content back and okay, this is all informational, but it doesn't tie into our bigger play. It doesn't speak to why we're spending budget on this piece. And a writer's not going to know that unless you tell them.
Neither's AI.
True.
Surprise. I see it a lot from designers, but they're okay, in order to use AI, someone has to clearly articulate what they want and what they want it to look like. We're fine. We're safe. AI is not taking our job. Yet mass produced, It's not going to push back and kind of give you the strategy or help guide you in any way, which is why it's that tool. But you have to put the work in to do it.
And your insights and your game plan, unless you're trying to outsource your own job to AI, which you're probably not. Hey, what are all my competitors doing? What can you tell about the trends in my industry? What sort of CTAs are popular? It can crunch some of those numbers, but then you risk, doing the same thing, repetitive content, repetitive strategy, lack of differentiation in the market. That's not what you're going for. That's not why you got your job. So don't. Just don't.
Exactly. So there is some truth to that. Lean into what you do well. Lean into what AI can't. I think maybe instead of use AI for the things you're not good at, use it for the things that aren't worth your time.
My name is Chris Baszto, so I'm the head of marketing at Industrious. I've been here for about 3 years, and I oversee all things regarding our global marketing engine. So that has multiple different teams within it. We have a very heavy focus around growth, so paid media, web, conversion rate optimization, mid-funnel, email marketing efforts, all of those things about how we find unique audiences and bring them into our funnel and convert them down into a sales conversation. I also have underneath my umbrella a brand and member engagement team.
Chris Baszto, thank you so much for joining Content Matters. So one of the things I love to start with is, how did you get to where you are? Sometimes marketers are cradle marketers and they've been in this function since the beginning?
In my case, I grew up in the industry in a way. My father was a creative director in an agency down in Tampa. So I grew up going to the video shoots. I was the little kid that was the extra. I would go with my father to work on Fridays during the summer, and they'd give me mini briefs, and I would color it and draw it and get to pitch it at the end of the day. This is the lifestyle I kind of grew up in. And I never knew wanting to be anything other than in the marketing field. It just, as I grew older, I realized I didn't have the artistic talents of my father, but during an internship, I got really interested in the digital side of the marketing space, which really led to me pursuing kind of like a media and digital type role. And once I got out of college. So I think of my career as like two halves. Like I spent the first half in more regional full service agencies out of the Denver market where I was embedded within the media and digital teams. And then I ultimately made the leap into the large media agency holding companies kind of like midway through my career as I was getting into my 30s, and ended up kind of doing the whole car wash of like going through. I worked at Publicis for a bit. I did some time with Group M, did some time with Omnicom, and just got to work with a host of brands. Everybody from P&G, NBC Universal, Barclays, like Microsoft in Seattle. It was a really fun run. And ultimately, I started finding myself wanting to try something a little bit different. And actually, it's funny enough, follow my dad's route and go in-house and pretty much about the same time in life. And my story to Industrious, and it was such a unique moment because I had never known anything about Industrious. I barely knew something about WeWork. I didn't know the co-working industry, but my neighbor, who was a good friend of mine, was actually a contractor for a competitor of Industrious. And on Friday afternoon, he mentioned to me that he was looking for a new job and he wanted to get a job at this company called Industrious. And never heard of it. I asked him kind of what was the thing. He's like, they're just amazing people. They're so smart. They're unique and they're different. And they have these really cool offsites and they invest in their people. That's all I knew. That Friday evening, a friend who was involved in finance brought their partner over, and they were talking about, companies that were somehow co-working, and they were talking about Industrious, and they were talking about how Industrious and Jamie Rodari, our CEO and co-founder Justin Stewart, built this really amazing business model that they think is going to be the model for this industry moving forward. So that Monday, I came across a job on LinkedIn for Industrious, and I just went after it with full on abandon. And it just so happened like that things lined up, and they liked the conversation with me, and I ended up joining the team. And so from my time here, like I moved in, I started in a more performance-based role, looking at that like growth engine for the business. And I think just staying focused on cross-functional partnership, agile planning, hostile activation, and then a mixture of a little bit of my understanding of content, brand design, and things like that, just from growing up in the business. I need to like slowly try and move into this position, overseeing the whole functional team.
That's amazing. It sounds so kismet to have different people from different walks of life. And there's like this kind of like nagging, consistent thread of Industrious. And then it was
quite remarkable. It really was. Like,
how do you feel like your background specifically with brand creative, that agency has helped you or given you a unique perspective as a marketer?
I think the perspective that I have is I understand the kind of like strategy behind media when it comes to like finding audiences, all the reach, frequency goals and needed to accomplish goals, and importance of planning large scale campaigns, multi-channel, multi-tactic, multi-format. But I also am very familiar with the failures that can come from when creative and brand and content teams are properly integrated with the outbound strategy as it goes into market. Because all too many times I've had amazing go-to-market strategies, but creative that fell absolutely flat because the briefs weren't connected and the teams weren't communicating with one another. And I think that's given me a unique perspective because I understand the impact of both sides on each other. And yeah, it allows me to kind of jump in and out of these conversations. And the other element too is not only just my personal background with my family, but also like my first agency that I started at was like a pure play creative shop. And I think it's one of the most creative agencies I've ever seen or been a part of, which is Cactus Marketing Communications down in Denver. And I got to see the creative process feed into the outbound strategy, and creative was so much a bigger driver. And I've always been trying to like recapture some of that I think, magic that team had.
Yeah, I feel like, marketing, I feel like you used to have marketing is just arts and crafts. They do pretty designs. They write pretty words. And over the last, 10 to 15 years, we've really tried to move into the direction of being more revenue generating focused, tying everything we do. But there's still this element of a really good creative that almost, not that they can't be associated to revenue, but they need to have freedom. And if all you're focusing on is these KPIs, it can be in tension with it, at odds with each other, to where I almost feel like some of the performance-based marketers are probably more like salespeople and more aligned with sales than creatives and performance-based marketers are. So I'm curious, as like a really tactical thing, I think this is something a lot of marketing leaders struggle with. How do you help bridge the gap between a performance-based marketer that's just trying to get that extra lead, hit those metrics, drive a little bit more pipeline, and a creative team that's trying to emotionally connect with an audience and tell a story visually or more narrative? Like, how do you cross that chasm between those two folks?
There's like two things that come to mind as we're talking about that. Like, I think there's one, the importance of that headline. Back in the day, 15 plus years, it was like, get the headline, you got to nail that. And that was the thing. And you were just going to hit that repeatedly, reach frequency with those specific numbers, specific headline. I think now you can train your creative teams to think of the now digital environment and digital world that we're living as an unlock for their creativity. You can actually build 5 or 6 different variations of your messaging and positioning and be as creative as you want, and actually let the market dictate what's going to be most successful and what is driving the most engagement. I think it actually could be seen as an unlock for creativity, because you don't have to just draw a line in the sand and go with one thing and use that as your color. Now, you obviously want brand consistency and all those things, but I think there's an unlock that could come when performance-based marketing is engaging with creative in the right way, and they're setting up the right guardrails to measure that success. Now, to the measuring of the success part, I think we've gotten too obsessed with directly attributable one-to-one matching, because it's not, as you said, always going to be a one-to-one match. But like, if you set up the right kind of like guardrails for how are you building the brand, you can actually start seeing an impact. Like, I think really good creative mid-market is going to actually generate interest and demand for your business. You're going to have folks seeking you out in a real way. Here's an example of like the way you can like do creative and market is like launching a big, high impact, out of the box creative idea and market. You should be able to see an impact in the volume of people that are searching for your brand and your business. You should be able to see an impact in your conversion rates, especially when it comes into like, if you're very heavy performance focused and you have search and market. Familiarity with a brand is going to impact your conversion at the bottom of the funnel. You just have to set up the triggers and the signals so that you can understand that. Because like for me, in like a non-brand co-working term versus a branded term, you're 15 to 20 times more likely to convert into a deal seeking out Industrious and looking for us as a business, versus if you're finding us via a more generic term and using that as a method of discovery. So a really creative activation strategy that generates companies seeking us out when they need services and solutions is going to have immediate revenue impact. So the two houses can play together.
Half the battle sometimes is just getting leadership to buy into these experiences, into good brand plays that may not have immediately attributable ROI, but does ultimately impact things. And I think leadership tends to want to pull the trigger or like pull back a little too soon before you really get a chance to let things like that come to fruition. So the fact that I think that's one of the differentiators with your agency background and creative background, leading a marketing team, is recognizing like how that works and believing and giving stuff enough time to play out.
Yeah, and I think there's like a maturity of an organization as it grows. Like in your early on and earlier stages, you need to have predictable, consistent gains that you can plan forward. You can understand, I put X amount of dollars in market, I'm going to get X amount of returns. And if your team's doing their job correctly, there's going to get to a point where like those returns are really predictable, but you start getting to a point of diminishing returns where you can't just put more budget and dump that into acquisition engines and channels. You actually have to find, move up that awareness, knowledge, consideration, action, loyalty stages. Yeah. By moving up the funnel, you're going to make your bottom of funnel wider so you can capture more.
Yep.
And I think that's a lot of companies struggle in that transition. It's not going to be something that ever is immediate. I think we've done a good job of like kind of getting that narrative out there. Like we've built that predictable engine. We built that consistency, and now we're just going and shifting our focus to really like kind of widening that revenue bucket at the bottom.
Well, and I think this is a great kind of transition to one of the things I want to dive into. And I would like to say that this will be the only time I talk about my love of Industrious. But if you know me, you know that I've talked a lot about how much I love Industrious. Got to experience a couple offices here locally in Indianapolis, and just the environment, the people, the staff was so different than other co-working places. And then got to connect with you, Chris, and have gotten to know the Industrious team. And it comes from the people 100%. I think that's also something brands tend to forget, is like your people are your brand, and every experience they have with you impacts it. So I'm part of why I'm so excited about our conversation today, is because I am a big fan of the brand. But, we've talked before that, Industrious is in this really interesting position right now. So the two things, one is that kind of global versus local, or corporate versus field experience. And the other is the team and the cross collaboration that every marketer has to sit in. For those of you who are maybe less familiar with Industrious, there are community managers at every location. And that obviously is another team, I assume another department that you don't manage. But the way that community manager creates those authentic experiences, shows up for those end users, directly impacts their experience and their thoughts of Industrious, and is almost, it feels like another distribution channel for your content, for your marketing messaging. How have you guys kind of positioned marketing internally, and are there any processes or workflows to kind of pull in all the different teams at Industrious to kind of have that one unified feel?
It certainly could present itself as a challenge for many companies. Like I've worked with brands in the past where we were trying to like manufacture a positioning or manufacturing a brand mission that might not be actually authentic to the experience day to day with those companies. Like it's an aspirational brand. I feel, and everybody at this company feels, like we have the best member experience in the industry. The way that our operations teams train our member experience managers, and the way that our member experience managers show up for our members in our community every day is so authentic and so real and so a step above anything else. It makes the brand work so much easier. The hardest part is actually harvesting those moments and turning them into something much more scalable and national. And so to your point about like the operations teams and the sales teams and the marketing team, yes, being separate units, we all have this same shared core. And so that the way that the operations teams are being trained, the service principles and the value proposition that they're pitching and building into both how they show up day to day, how they engage with our members, how they talk about our brand, we were able to take all of those and ladder them up into like our brand mission and our brand tone of voice, to where it's actually a very consistent through line from the member experience all the way up to what we want to talk about in the national level. And that's something very special. And I say to anybody that comes into the marketing team is like, actually, it's a much easier job in that sense, that we just really have to find a way to tell the most authentic story about our experience and communicate solves to the right folks.
Yeah. Do you think that starts at the leadership level? That like your
1,000%.
Yeah.
The intent of this business when Jamie and Justin first founded it was to be, aspirationally, they wanted to be the best in the business, but they wanted to provide an experience where people could do their best work. They were in flex office environments where they weren't necessarily proud to bring folks, external folks into their working experience. And so they built Industrious with the intent to have the best workplace experience and to have the best environment. And by nature of both their personality and what they were looking for in the company when they built this, like we built a really wonderful member experience focused business. So it's very early on in how this company was built and structured. And it's been quite lovely that we've been able to maintain that as we've scaled to now over 200 locations, and we've acquired companies in Europe and APAC and things like that.
Yeah. I think this conversation and also the experiences I've had reminds me, so book recommendation, everyone, if you haven't read Unreasonable Hospitality, highly recommend just from a customer service. It's from the hospitality, like a New York restaurateur, but it is about kind of going above and beyond, finding those authentic moments and just leaning in, whether it's scalable or not, but putting that at the center of everything. And it sounds like your leadership team did that from the jump. Any advice you'd give for folks who are listening and being like, wow, that sounds great. I wish I had that clarity of vision at the leadership level. What do you do if there's maybe not that same clear sense of what it should be?
Well, funny enough, Unreasonable Hospitality comment, that is a very common book discussed within our leadership team and our operations team, and it is on my desk. So in terms of getting that shared point of view on like messaging, brand positioning, and all of that work, it sounds like it was like this easy thing to get to. But actually, it was a lot of work to get to this shared, consistent tone of voice, brand positioning, brand mission statement. There was something authentic down in our core, and we all knew it, and we could all feel it, but we were all describing it in slightly different ways. And where this is relevant from like to speaking to other marketers is like, one of the things that we did last year was we actually, to the conversation earlier, talking about like we had a very predictable performance marketing engine. We knew we were going to have to evolve into a much larger brand and product focused function. And before we did that, we had to land a consistent point of view on what is our brand, what is our tone, what are we positioned as, and like have that be a core tenet of our business. And what we ended up doing was we actually pulled in leaders from across operations, design, our C-suite, marketing, member experience, and we actually did the whole running workshops around brand design. It was something that was debated and discussed in a room, like what should be our brand positioning. And there were disagreements. We saw kind of like two different ways of looking at it, and we disagreed and then committed. And the fun thing about that type of brand, we're pulling in leaders of all the different functions of how our brand is realized in a physical space. It allowed for wherever we landed on the tone, the positioning, and all of these things to be very authentic. We pulled all of the things up into that discussion, and then we really codified all of it.
I love the disagreed and then committed piece of it. I feel like that sometimes gets lost because, you might not see things the same way, but you need to have, respectful, open, transparent, hard conversation. And then wherever it lands, you have to kind of let all of the baggage or past go and just commit and go full force in it. And I think that's maybe a key piece that people don't always get, is that commit after a decision's made.
It's a big part of how we function. And I think, you would think being an only child, I would not like to be getting told no. And in reality, like when I'm interviewing folks to join the team, like one of the things I always get the question, like, what are you looking for in somebody on your team? And I'm like, I want somebody to come in and tell me no. Like one of my favorite things in the world is like, if I come up with this big grandiose plan or idea and I'm like, all right, everybody, this is what we're going to do. And somebody goes, no, I don't think that's the right way based on the outcomes you're trying to do. Like, we're going to do it this. We should do it this way. Yeah. I think, knowing my experience, we should go this way. I love that. And I think in our organization, there's a lot of trust that's built within the leadership team that allows for not only embracing that culture within like my own team, but then embracing that culture within the leadership team, because it trickles down.
As a sales and marketing leader, I'm always interested to hear about a team's tech stack. At Composely, we use Apollo with HubSpot to fuel our outbound outreach. My team loves it. It consistently provides accurate contact information and is incredibly user-friendly. If you're thinking about changing your data provider or just want to hear more about our experience, connect with me on LinkedIn or check out the link in the show notes of this episode. Improve your inbound, increase conversion, and keep your marketing database squeaky clean with Apollo.
I think some of the times where I've missed professionally is when I disagreed, but I didn't state it.
I agree with
like that. If you're in marketing, and like a key piece of advice is like in those moments where you disagree, I would hope that your boss or your leader, whether it's C-suite or your head of marketing or your head of brand or head of performance, like you should state your point of view. Like, you are hired in this organization, in this team, to have a point of view. That's where you're really valuable. And if you have a moment where you disagree with like a line of thinking or approach, like, you know what, it's good to where you're going, Nicole. Like, look, based on these outcomes we're trying to drive to and the data points that I might know, or the previous tests we might have run, I don't know if we're going about this the right way. It opens up the door to at least have the discussion. And you know what? If ultimately it goes to a place where, you know what, we're just going to go this direction, it's a strategic imperative for the company, strategic imperative for our team, at least you've kind of stated that piece. And it's the right play. And it also, I think, in a lot of ways, has been empowering for me.
Yep.
When I've disagreed, then committed, and then just went with it, I felt like, all right, cool, let's go.
Yep.
I think there's an empowering space in that, but rather than holding on to a resentment that maybe you didn't say something and then you hold that resentment and it's going to affect your outcomes.
I'm going to go a layer deeper than this. And it's been one of my, I don't know, it's been on my mind a lot lately. And what better way to talk about pet peeves than on a podcast? But this idea of managing up.
Managing up, yes, it's always been given kind of a bad rap, but I think it's being just more self-aware. The folks that are aware more of like what's happening within their org and their team are the ones that I think are most often the ones that are able to manage up most effectively. It's something I've always been navigating around. It's my challenge. I love getting down into it, and shifting my perspective is always hard. Like, if you're looking up and like, say you're reporting, say your individual contributor role, and you're reporting it to a senior manager or up to a director, like, I think an important thing when you're having those columns going up is shifting the perspective to look at it from that director's role, or look at it from that. In my example, you know, I report up into our C-suite, and the chief commercial officer that I report into has a ton of things that she is overseeing. She's absolutely amazing. She has this wide breadth of things within the organization that she's overseeing. And the 100 tasks that I'm navigating under marketing, I need to package that up in a way that it's easily digestible and that she can make decisions off of.
Yep.
And like, the best way when I think I've been most effective, either in this role or in any other role, is when I'm like, okay, how would that person want to receive this particular information? And that can be everything as simply changing the format. I'm obsessed with PowerPoints.
Me too.
That's my thing.
I love slide decks.
At my organization, everybody digests things much more effectively through memos and through editorial, writing out your thinking and writing out your thoughts.
More Amazon style, a little, totally. 2-page memo.
Or another route that I go really often when I'm managing up or in coaching people on managing up is like, what's important to that person? If you know the goals of that particular team or that person, speaking to the goals of that individual is what's going to help you break through the clutter of like, okay, I have to do these 10 admin things that ladder up to this.
Yep.
Starting up here and saying, look, we have this goal. Your goal here is this. I'm trying to help assist with that goal here. Mm-hmm. And these are the things I need to do to accomplish X, Y, Z. It's just these little perspective shifts. It could be the format at which the information is received, or it could be what's important to that person, whether it's goals or team or their style, and trying to respond to that. Those are when people are most effective. There are people in this organization that are just so phenomenal at it. And it's not that they're doing anything other than just being very aware of all the nuances within the business and our structure, and they're able to respond to that.
Absolutely. And I think something you said too, the come with a perspective, you were hired to have a point of view. I think that mindset shift is also often one of the biggest shifts of like manager to director or individual contributor to more strategic leader, is not just presenting data or being able to look through data, but provide some sort of analysis or point of view on what that is, or what from your seat, how you view it in relation to the business. And I think that's something that people sometimes forget when kind of making that initial like IC to strategic shift is, I want to know your thoughts on this, and being able to do that, I think, is really critical.
Yeah, it's like at the most basic level of like marketing skills when you're talking about like looking at data, it's like impressions, click-through rate. I don't give a damn about that. Like, What does that mean?
Yes.
Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it responding to this or to that in the market? Is it this creative or that? Like, the why is what's important.
Yes.
And I think that when you're shuffling tasks, that can get messed in like that. That's something that anybody at any level in any organization can do. That entry level person that's out of college that might be doing kind of like moving, whether it's reporting, whether it's kind of like web work, like they're right there. They can tell you the why, and I think they just need anybody to just be empowered to say your point of view there. And if you're not empowered to say your point of view there, like, well, there's a lot of other companies out there that are absolutely willing to hear it. And I think the right organizations are the ones that want to hear a point of view.
I mean, I can think of many times sitting in a conference room with a leader who was like, what are your thoughts on this? And I was so scared to say it because I was like, what if I'm wrong? What if I open my mouth and what I say is terrible and you hate it? And then, you get fired. And when I finally was like, yes, I have a thought, but I'm nervous to say it. If my leader at that time had been like, I don't care, or like not created a psychologically safe environment for me to work through that and kind of grow past it, that's a very different experience. I think sometimes that does hold us back to be like, well, yeah, I have an opinion, but what if my opinion's wrong? Or what if, but that's where you have to learn.
Could be.
Exactly. And that's okay.
That's fine. Everybody's had a million. Like I also say all the time, like, I know what to do, primarily because I've done everything else wrong.
What not to do, yeah. Exactly.
I have broken so many things. I've done so many things wrong. And I learned from it as a result. And also, like, when opinions can be wrong, but you can build on them. Like your voice and you even saying an idea can turn into something else. It doesn't have to be. So, like, it's on the leaders to create the safe space for those things to open up. And yeah, I hope more leaders out there welcome that. I've worked in environments in the past where that wasn't necessarily a welcome space, and not my vibe.
Yes. No, good vibes only.
I got to do a digital class at a university in New York, and I got to talk, and they asked her a bit of advice to their first job. And what I told them to do is like, yes, you're going to come in, you're going to be focused on real task-based work, and you're going to be, you're going to have tasks, something to accomplish. But I would recommend to all of them to look for the white space on the team. Any team.
What a designer thing to say.
I know, totally. But look for the white space on the team, whether it be AI, whether it be the new social platform like TikTok, or maybe whatever the new thing, the new technology, the new opportunity that somebody like me that's been around for like 18, 19 years that has no idea how to use that thing. If you step into that white space, whether it be in the industry or on your team, and you become the expert in that, you also have an incredibly valuable voice. Because like I use the example with those students, I was like, look, TikTok is the easy one, and very candid to them. I was like, look, you might be on a team in your first job that has no idea how to use TikTok. If you go in there and you figure out how the algorithm works, how the platform works, the buying models, or on the flip side, on the creative side, what is the type of content strategy, the messaging strategy, the formats and the UGC kind of builds that's going to work in the algorithm. Like if you become the expert in that, at the age of 23, you could have a voice in a room with somebody that's been doing it 25, 30 years, and they're going to look to you.
It's such a good reminder, of course, for young professionals who want to find their footing. So relevant. I love that. But even today, I mean, every time I've been hesitant to learn something new, I mean, for me, I think of HubSpot, and owning more like CRM management. I was very hesitant because I didn't know what I was doing. And then when I finally started learning more, it opened up so many opportunities because suddenly I was the only one who knew how the CRM worked. And so I think that really applies at any level, even manager level. I see fresh out of college, like if you can find that white space where there's a gap and things are falling through, or there's opportunity that's being missed because people just don't have the time, so much opportunity there. So I love that. Find the white space and own it.
And that was one of the things that you're totally right. It's not just an entry level, at any level in the org. Like I came in as a director level within Industrious, and I had a very specific scope. And my aspirations were bigger than that, but I found where the white space was. Like I observed that I was focusing on growth, but there were like 5 or 6 other things that are relevant for the growth of the business that were not in my job description. And nobody was doing them well or focused because it was just kind of living in this bubble. And I just slowly started kind of like pulling those things together, and it expanded my scope, it expanded my role, and ultimately led to me in the position I'm in today. And it was the same kind of concept. It's finding the white space, stepping into it, and then becoming the expert in it.
I love
I
that.
don't like saying I'm an expert in anything. I'm always learning, but
Internally, you are the expert. I mean, of course, yes, I love
internally
that.
maybe.
We can always grow and learn more 100%, but you're the one people probably go to. And that's where, it led to leadership. And that was your goal, which I think is amazing. And I think that grit, I always say, if you can find the right ball, sometimes people do pick up the wrong balls, but if you see a ball, if you pick it up and you get it to the other end of the field, that is always going to be recognized. And that is kind of the white space, is where are things not getting done? And if you can fill that gap, it is so meaningful. Okay, so the second thing, and we got down such a great tangent here, but is also this idea of content. You mentioned finding those unique experiences at the local level and pulling it up into more of a national campaign or national messaging. Industrious is pretty large. I mean, you have locations all across the world now, but a pretty small, scrappy marketing team that's doing some amazing work. How do you balance, focusing on national corporate brand versus like local activation of the content that you're creating and the campaigns?
I think this is something that as our team is evolving, as our scope is evolving, we are in the process of scaling up to meet the demands of the business at large, because this is something where I don't think we have like the full apparatus, the whole content team structure in place to meet the needs of the business at large. But what I think we are focusing on right now is, from a content perspective, is like shifting a lot of our brand and design work into a kind of separate team structure to focus on the visual identity of the brand and how that's executed across digital, in-person environments, all of those things. So like at one point we had those kind of under the same umbrella, and it was very distracting. And the brand and visual work in itself needs to be kind of a separate team that's focused. And what we're building right now is a much more focused content engine that's centered around a handful of really smart FTEs, like full-time employees that are very smart and heady, and then building out a stable partners that help us accomplish tasks. I call it like stable of unicorns. But like I want to get to a space where we have partners that can help us, like Composely, that can come in and help us with a lot of content overflow needs, whether it just be editorial or influencer networks to help us tap into like influencers at scale to develop not just influencers for their own social networks, but also using influencers just to help us with video production when we can't move as quick as we want to. Same concept applies. It's like, I think what we're really focusing on is just building out a stable that can capture these things at scale, and then building a centralized function that's able to own the strategy, what good looks like, set the standards, and then map out all the needs and when.
So I'm hearing hire strategy in-house, and then find those folks that can really execute in their niches well and augment where you need to move more quickly. But how do you think about...
Much more focused way of saying that. Absolutely.
No, I just want to make sure I was hearing that, because I think that's a place a lot of leaders struggle, is when you're doing capacity planning or team planning, like, where do I make the bet that I want this in-house? Someone's waking up every day thinking about this problem, helping me solve it, and where can I find efficiency with partners? So I think that's a common challenge that we have to solve.
I can't say I have the perfect answer for all of these things, and it's a bunch of like learning, and like we've had multiple agencies for like other tactics that we've gone through, and then we figured out what good looks like, perfected that, and then brought it in-house.
Yep.
I think where a lot of other organizations and other marketing is missing is something that I think is like a skill in marketing, which is owning the brief. Like throughout the course of my career, I've just seen a slow and steady degradation of ability to give a concise and specific brief to an external partner. If you go back to the start where I started my career, and the briefs that I looked at that were passed from an in-house marketing team to the briefs that I was getting towards the end of my agency career, they've slowly broken down. I think rather dramatically. And like, I think being able to own the brief and all the elements of the brief and understanding what your brand standards are in a very concise and clear way, understanding what your tone of voice is, understanding your channel strategy, understanding your audience segmentation, like those pieces, if you can nail those really well, all of a sudden you can brief a whole host of external partners to come in and solve challenges for you, because you can set what good looks like and give them a base to build off of. What all too often happens is you bring in a third party, say for content, and you're not appropriately briefing them and giving what they need to be successful. And of course, it's going to be wrong. It's going to be all over the place. That is going to be the same. That's going to always end up being the challenge. And I think if you land that brief, if you focus on that, you're going to open up a whole stable of unicorns, because there are tons of smart people that are living in this gig economy that are just able to move at a speed at which most in-house marketing teams are not going to be able to. If you're not a full large scale enterprise organization and you're a company like Industrious, it's still in hyper growth mode, it's very hard to keep up with the pace of the business with a traditional marketing function.
Yeah.
So,
I love that.
Nailing the brief and pulling in partners to solve tasks, you can move quickly.
And I think it's okay to be honest. Like sometimes there's a mental block, or, hey, I know this brief, but in this instance, I'm really struggling, or our team's struggling. Like, can you bring some thoughts or ideation to the table? And that's a great partnership. Like, unless you're hiring a brand agency to help you build out your audience segmentation, build out your tone of voice, if you just go to a videographer without that nailed down, and then you're asking the videographer to make assumptions of the audience, the narrative, like that's going to fall down. That's not going to be successful.
Where I've seen us do really well with external partners from content production, like where we have rushed briefs and we have missed some of the like harder things to do, like timing, audience, that stuff. So you're like, when you get more into the nuances of the brief and like really giving the strategic background and what you're trying to drive towards and the style that you're trying to deliver, like when that stuff's missed, like the directors aren't going to be able to capture that, or the content writers aren't going to be able to capture that, and they miss. Where I feel like we've landed the brief up front and we were very intentional with everything that went into how we brought that third party in the door. I think that's always when we've had the best outcomes.
I love that. That's great. Okay, we're going to wrap up with some rapid fire. What is a marketing pet peeve?
All right, this is a peeve of mine for a long time, but it's always starting a discussion with, wouldn't it be cool if? When you're a smaller size marketing function, like leading with, wouldn't it be cool if? What I mean by that is like folks that are just coming up with something because it looks like interesting and cool, but it might not even be anything based on anything with our strategy, anything with our audience, anything with what we're trying to deliver. And I feel like if you start chasing like, oh, that would be cool if, that would be cool if, that would be cool if, you start going off in la la land as a team. The way to phrase it, because it sounds like I'm like giving a poo-poo on creativity, but it's more of like, hey, this is the goal and outcome we're trying to drive to. This is a really cool idea based off of that. I get so many just like, for example, like when Barbie came out, like I'm getting tons of like Barbie product partnership examples. And I'm like, it's not necessarily matching to the needs of the business and the needs of our team and the strategy and things that we're trying to drive to.
Well, and then as a leader, you feel so bad because you're like, you don't want to create a psychologically unsafe environment for new ideas. But when you get that, you're like, yes, that would be cool. Perhaps not right
There's
now.
There's moments for it.
Yes.
I know. I mean, in the sense of just like, I don't want to be just coming up with like big ideas that aren't rooted in some sort of sense of strategy. I don't even care if your point of view is like right on point with the strategy. It might be all in. That's fine. You can very easily chase the next shiny toy.
Yeah.
That's been part of the problem with like digital over the years, is like some new technology comes out, it's a new shiny toy, you chase it, and it's probably not even
That's fair.
going to be effective for.
Do you have a great AI use case that you have tried?
Job descriptions. There's two things that I use AI for constantly. It's for job descriptions when I'm trying to like tweak JDs, things like that, even for getting briefs very quickly built out. I also use it consistently for talking trash in my fantasy football league.
Okay.
I am entirely AI based.
What's the best trash talk? Can we get a little peek?
So currently our head of real estate, he's far smarter than I, and there's no way I could ever win in a witty banter contest with him. So anytime in our fantasy league, I'm just literally relying on ChatGPT to give me like, I literally put Perry said this, what should I say back?
Did you build a GPT for, this is my style of trash talk. This is how I want to sound.
No, but I think it kind of gets me.
Okay. I love that. You and the robot really best friends forming here.
I use it often. I've actually started using it as almost a search function as well, right? If I have a random question that pops up into my mind, for example, recently I was just looking for data sourcing around the number of SMB companies that are utilizing some shared office setting. Just like playing around. I was just I wanted to see an external data source. And so I just asked ChatGPT these random questions that pop into my head, and it'll pull it and sort where it got the information, and then you can go and find it.
I love that. Okay. What is one tool or app that you could not do your job without?
My favorite tool that I've been leaning into lately is because I'm embracing the flexible office co-working solution. I bounce around to our offices all the time, and my old model of having multiple notepads doesn't work. I would have a note-taking notepad, I'd have an important notepad, and I would have a to-do notepad. And I've transitioned to a digital notepad tool.
Like Remarkable?
I have a Remarkable.
Is it worth it?
Give them a plug. I'm obsessed.
Okay.
No, it is.
It's been on my wish list for a while but I'm still thinking, but you might push me over.
The nicest thing is that because I can share my notes, I can access them in the cloud. If I'm sitting with the team, I can scribble some things and then just send it off in a PDF to the team. There's always a whiteboard.
That's why I love Industrious. Because I can always find a whiteboard. Notepad. Yep. I love that. Okay, that's
a tool that has been really helpful for me. I have a backpack that is just loaded with all my chargers, my notepad, my things, and I just drop my laptop in and I go.
That's perfect. All right, let's end on a high note. What are some things that we can help you celebrate?
I think one thing that as a brand and a company that we're very proud of currently is that we've recently launched a new partnership with Delta. It's a very exciting moment for us, not only because it's an amazing program. We think we give a really good incentive to the Delta business travelers that sign up for this program. So you should certainly check it out and take a look. If you're listening to this podcast, it's definitely a really great value and a really great program. But I think what is really exciting about that is that a brand like Delta aligning with Industrious is something we're all very proud of. And the thing that stood out to me was when I got to go to their hospitality training, and it was very similar to that of an Industrious. We used very similar language, similar terminology, and it was something we're really proud of. And I think those types of moments when your brand aligns with another very strong brand, actually, and it opens up a lot of opportunities for us. So like how we talk about and bring in other partners. So there's a lot of exciting things happening.
That's amazing.
I think you'll see.
As a consumer of both Delta and Industrious, this makes complete sense to me. And literally when you said that, I was like, of course, two of my favorite brands aligning. Great to see those values and then bringing additional value to consumers. So that's so exciting. We can't wait to see it live. And yes, please check it out. If you're a Delta business traveler, you should 100% take advantage of this.
Yeah. And ultimately, like with the way we look at these opportunities is like if a company is best in class in their field, in their particular category, you want to talk to them because they're going to be able to bring value to our members, whether it's anything from tools like Remarkable, looking at y'all, or coffee or food beverage, and like there's so many things that we can bring to our members' experience that these types of partnerships unlock.
Yep. All right, it's time to celebrate another friend. Or should I say friends? Well, our friends Elizabeth Irvine, Jeff Coyle, and the team over at Market Muse recently announced their acquisition by Site Improve. The Market Muse team has been working tirelessly for nearly a decade to help marketers create optimized, valuable content to improve SERP rankings. This is such an incredible validation of all of their hard work and the blood, sweat, and tears. We couldn't be more excited for you, and we are excited to continue cheering you on as you head into this next phase of growth. If you guys want to learn more about it, check out either Elizabeth or Jeff's LinkedIns or go to marketmuse.com/siteimprove. Again, huge congratulations and hope that you guys are able to pop some champagne here soon. If you have a friend that's doing cool things, tell us. We want to celebrate them. Just go to composely/friends-matter to nominate. Again, that's compose.ly/friends-matter. Thanks for listening to this episode of Content Matters, created in partnership with Share Your Genius. If you like the show, please subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend. Otherwise, you can find all the resources you need to stay connected with us in the show notes. Till next time.